more love, more joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
And welcome to Living Your Inspired Life. You're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA. And we are running, Living Your Inspired Life is currently in the process, and believe me, everybody, it's been a process. We're in the process of running a crowdfunding program called Indiegogo to raise monies for Living Your Inspired Life and Positive Talk Radio to stay on the air, and then expand beyond the airwaves into webinars and e-courses and live events all around Southern California. So I invite you to go to livingyourinspiredlife.org and click on the Indiegogo logo, and you can go to the Indiegogo site. This is a really long explanation, isn't it? But you click on the pink thing on Living Your Inspired Life, you go to Indiegogo, see what we're up to, and make a contribution, people. Thank you so much. And later I'm going to tap on all the people that have already contributed, because the Living Your Inspired Life team and myself are profoundly grateful for all of you who have participated in getting the word out, helping Living Your Inspired Life to become more of a presence on Facebook and with your friends and your family. I'm so grateful. And mostly because we're happy that there is a collaboration of support that is happening for Living Your Inspired Life so that we can continue our existence and expand further. So thank you so much. And again, it's livingyourinspiredlife.org. Click on the pink Indiegogo logo and contribute today. So with that said, with all of that business out of the way, I am really grateful because I have a woman that I have highly respected and had the opportunity to work with, or rather she's worked with me, let me put it that way, on so many different levels. And she is going to be in Camarillo on June 21st at the Camarillo Center for Spiritual Living, giving a talk. So I wanted to have Dr. Kathy Hearn on the show today. Kathy, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Susan. Happy to be with you.
I'm just thrilled. I have all this energy going through me. Yay. So let me just tell everybody a bit about you. So I'll talk about you kind of like you're not here. Well, you're not here in the studio, but we'll talk about you a little bit. So Dr. Kathy Hearn is an international speaker and consultant and counselor and facilitator. And the work that she does is very deep and profound. Believe me, I have done the work with her. And she has been involved with Centers for Spiritual Living for over 25 years. Is that right? 30 years, Kathy?
About 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
Right. And 10 of those years were being the spiritual leader of that particular community, Centers for Spiritual Living. And currently, Dr. Kathy is serving as Dean of the Center for Spiritual Living School of Spiritual Leadership. So this woman has her chops down. She walks the talk and she has her chops down. So I am so grateful today to have you here because I wanted to, well, we were talking and emailing in the idea of having you on, of talking about Dharma. And I think that that's something that people that listen to the show don't necessarily know what that is about. So Kathy, let's talk a little bit about that before we get into other things.
Okay. Let me say that I came to the topic of Dharma when someone gave me a book. A friend gave me a book called The Great Work of Your Life by Stephen Cope. And I was in a time of switching out of my role of being the spiritual leader for the organization and wondering what my life was going to be now. And this book is all about, the focus is on who we are becoming what we do.
Wait, say that again? Who we are?
That who we are becomes what we do.
Uh-huh.
And so there's this really unique intersection between our essence, who we each uniquely are, and what we're here to do in the world. And so the book put me into that place of questioning that for myself and feeling deeply into it. And I was happy to discover that I'm actually always doing what I'm here to do. But it's the idea of Dharma. It's a very old idea. It comes out of the Vedic traditions. And the background story for it is the Bhagavad Gita, which is a story about a great battlefield, and Arjuna, the warrior, is surveying the battlefield with his chariot driver, who is Krishna, and he sees all of his kinsmen arrayed against him in this mythic war. And seeing this and realizing the prospects of slaying those whom he loves, who are part of his family, he falls on the floor of his chariot in paralysis. And it's a similar condition for many of us when we fall into doubt or we fall into not being able to do because we've lost the sense of what it is that we're here to do.
Oh boy, yeah.
And all of the Gita is about Krishna teaching Arjuna about who he is and what his path is about. Behind it all is this beautiful teaching called Indra's Net.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going on too long?
No. Talk about Indra's Net. I've mentioned it before, but I want to hear your perspective.
Indra's Net is a gorgeous teaching. It's highly visual. It's about the great god Indra through a cosmic net around his celestial home. And on the lines of the net, he placed a jewel for everything in creation. And so the idea is that all things in creation are first of all united on the net, but that each one of us and each thing in creation has its rightful place. And we are where we are because of who we are, and we're placed on the net of life purposefully, you might say, in the great cosmic plan. And it is our job to do what is ours to do to hold up our piece of the net. And so, again, it's coming into this realization of who one is and what we're each here to do.
So, Kathy,
let's
tease this out, because I have been the one that's been in the paralysis position, if you will, of doubt and, oh my God, fear, and, really, am I supposed to be doing this because I'd rather do something else? So how do it's a great story, and there's no Krishna, well, maybe there is a Krishna inside of me telling me to get off the floor, but how do you get off the floor?
Well, I'll tell you what Krishna says. He says, you don't know what to do because you don't know who you are. And so it is a call to begin to go deeply into one's essence. And one place to look first is at what you loved to do when you were a child. For example, for myself, I used to go around, I remember distinctly this little medicine bag, this little bag that my father had given me. It was, red plastic. It was probably a thrown-off shaving kit or something. And I would carry around Band-Aids, and when anybody was hurt, I would put a Band-Aid on them. Oh. And so that was a little Dharma glimmer about the healing work that I do. Hopefully I don't just put Band-Aids on things. The work's a bit deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I love to do was I love to play school, and I was always a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So these have both been Dharma glimmers for me about what my path is, teaching and healing work and speaking. So it's a deep inquiry into really the essence of your being, and there isn't really a shortcut to it, but it is to begin the conversation. There's always tremendous amount of doubt when we come to look at our Dharma, because we have to move through layers of conditioning and all the voices that say you should be this or you should be that, to come to what's really essentially true.
It's interesting that I love how this stuff works, how the universe syncs people up to come on my show and we have a conversation. And it's always the right, perfect conversation, at least for me. I believe it's the right, perfect conversation for people that are listening too. But it's interesting that you say this about the deep inquiry of your essence and what we're here to do, because the Indiegogo campaign that we're running for Living Your Inspired Life has been kicking my backside, let me put it that way. In that, myself and many of the team members that have been participating and working very hard on the campaign and sharing it, and everybody's running up against their block. And the block appears to be fear around being more than who they think they are.
Did you say being larger?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And in asking for a chunk of change, right? it's been pushing everyone's buttons in terms of, well, I can't ask this friend, or I asked them for something else last month and now I'm asking them for this, or whatever it is, that belief system, which I think distills down to my work, not my Susan's work, but the individuals that are working on the individual team members, our work is not that valuable because, and then you fill in the blank. So in this deep inquiry of what is our purpose, what are we here to do, what would you say to that? Well, how would you speak to that? Because there's definitely people that have been on the floor in paralysis.
Yes, right. I think we can all relate to that. Or another image for it is sitting at the, putting up your folding chair in the middle of the crossroads. And you can't, you don't take a direction.
Yep.
Let's see. I would say that what is ours to do from this perspective, and the Gita is not the only perspective on the subject of purpose, but from this very ancient perspective, that you do what you do because it's yours to do, and you keep doing the doing regardless of what the results are. And it does, so let go of the fruits of the labor is one of the teachings of the Gita here. And it is to let go of all of those considerations. And one reason why I like Stephen Cope's book so much is that he has wonderful biographies and Dharma stories about, people that we know and love. He starts with Walt Whitman and Thoreau and goes on to Beethoven and Marion Woodman and John Keats and all kinds of people who lived their Dharma in ways that were not always easy for them, and yet it was theirs to do, and they had the fulfillment of that. So it's something about getting past all of the other considerations. If it's really truly yours to do, it's to be done.
So it's about letting go of what you think the outcome is supposed to be.
That's right.
When you say the fruits of your labor. Now
it's to let go of the outcome.
Well, now this has got to be a hard thing for those of us.
Sure.
Okay, I'm raising my hand, Kathy. Many of us who have grown up in a system of you set a goal and you achieve it.
Right.
And so letting go of the fruits of your labor sounds like a paradox. That sounds like you can't do it.
What it means is that you don't do what you do or stop doing it because of the outcome.
You don't do what you do or stop doing it because of the outcome.
Correct. And I know these are really deep principles. I teach a 6-week class on this, so we're doing, a short conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's when we're living deeply enough in the essence and truth of our being, we do what we're called to do because it's ours to do.
Okay, my brain is getting twisted now.
I don't know another way to say it, but it's worth contemplating. And I'll just say to you that it was so important for me to think about this because in all of my years until about 3 years ago, I was very driven by supporting organizations.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I've lived in spiritual organizations for about 30 years, all of which is very, very good. But there was a lot of demand and necessity based on supporting something greater than I was that I was a part of. And stepping out of the leadership role was such a delicious time to really go within and say, now, what is really true for me? And what do I want to do? And more importantly, what am I inspired to do? Not what do I have to do based on the demands of the outside thing that I'm supporting. Does that make sense the way I'm saying it?
It makes perfect sense to me.
And so it's a very deep encounter with who am I really and what's my place on the net of life and what am I called to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I find, and we sometimes think that if we live in that way, that we're not going to have what we need. I'm not finding that to be true at all.
Okay, by what we need, you mean like financial funding so that you can pay your bills and stuff.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so now there's 3 things I want to talk about out of this brief little piece. But the first thing is I want to read a quote because this has really literally what you're describing has been the experience of for myself and the team members on Living Your Inspired Life. And yesterday or the day before, Nipun Mehta, who's been on our show, who I just adore, sends out a a newsletter called Awaken Weekly that always has profound snippets in it and people and conversations. And one of my favorite authors, Margaret Wheatley, was featured this week. And she's talking about doing the work. And she says, so I want to read this quote. It is the way we offer our work as a gift to those we love, to those we care about, to the issues we care about. It is the way we offer the work that in that way we find fearlessness. So beyond hope and fear is, she says, I think, is the possibility of love. And so she's saying to offer the work out of love, not out of wanting to get paid.
Right.
Or whatever it is, get accolades or whatever it is we think, or get the vacation time or whatever.
Right. I think that as we travel and mature on the spiritual path, that we live life more as a giving than as a getting. But that we find in the giving, there's the return. But we're not doing it for the return. It's just a logical result of being full-hearted and doing what you're inspired to do. So I agree completely with what she says.
Yeah, and I do too. And I found, again, this is just such a challenging concept for those of us that have, credit card debt. Hello, I'm raising my hand.
Sure.
A mortgage, I'm raising my hand. Whatever it is, a child in school, it becomes hard to comprehend. How do I give and not worry about the getting?
Right. Well, I would say that the first pillar of Dharma is to look to your Dharma. And so it's to find within everything that you're already doing, where is your Dharma being expressed, or how is it being expressed? And it's that sense of whatever the constraints are in life. And yes, we all have them, and we have money concerns and various things. But within that, find the place where you're really living what you're called to do. You're really doing what you're called to do. You're in a Dharma situation with your radio program, so you're doing it.
Yeah,
and I think the feeling of that begins to be more fulfilled. But that's really what it's about: is let me just connect with who I am as it expresses and what I'm supposed to do. That's step number one.
Okay, so because what is coming up for me, or has been for several years now, but especially during this Indiegogo, I'm reminded of it, is that the way we used to do things for the last, several centuries is complete. It's done. And to continue to do the next several centuries, or even just the next year, the way I used to do things, I'm finding that I keep it's almost like I'm running into dead ends. I'm in a maze where there's no way out, as opposed to a labyrinth, if you will, where there is a circular motion of going in and then coming back out, and going in and coming back out. So what I'm finding, and what I'm encouraging the people that I work with and my team members, is that we are now in that place of, now this is going to get heady, people, sorry. But I think we're in that place of being the new initiates. We're being initiated into the new paradigm of how to live life in a place of, like you were saying, of open-hearted giving, of connectivity, of collaboration, and all of those things. And it doesn't look like me, myself, and I setting a goal, achieving it, and then getting all the toys.
Right. It's the focus is different. The results can still be you have plenty to live on, and have the good things of life, whatever those might be. But the reason for doing what you do is different than that. Because I think when we, especially with the American dream that we don't seem to talk about anymore, it was all about doing to get,
right?
To build, to amass stuff, and stuff is fine. I like stuff, but it's not the purpose of my life. So it's that kind of shift.
And why do you think we're not talking about the American dream anymore? It seems like there's lots of people that are still out there wanting it.
I think it fell with the Twin Towers.
Oh, I feel that. Yeah.
I think that conversation was over, and maybe it will it'll have to be different, because that was a loss of innocence for us, and it really ushered us into a new state, on a spiritual level, where we look to God as source and protection, not all those external things.
Not all the external things. So it's so interesting, Kathy. I have a quote by Ernest Holmes. I just, I love to just open books up and somebody will speak to me, and I have no idea where I'm going to use this thing during a radio show, but you just said it, so I'm going to read this. Ernest Holmes says, "Those who win their way through life by force eventually become weary with the struggle, the purpose of which never reaches its final goal. Personality is not an external thing. For everything we do and say and think, everything we appear to be outwardly, is always the result of some hidden fire burning at the center of our being, some divine reality which we did not create, but which we may discover." And that sounds exactly like what you just said. It's with the Twin Towers falling and that whole idea of it's time not to look outside ourselves for what it is, for who we are, for why we're here.
Right. And let me just say that it's a natural part of the path to be in that stage where we set goals and produce results and accumulate the good stuff. We, have a house, we have a car, we have a job, we get those kinds of things together. That's really an important part of the path. Sometimes people want to skip that, but that's where we learn how to, be responsible for our thinking, to produce and to manifest according to the law.
And also be responsible for our actions, yeah?
Right, and be responsible for our life, to take personal responsibility. It's just that that's not all there is. It's an important stage. Everybody has to go through it. And yet I like to call them rooms of consciousness. Another room of consciousness opens up after that, where we realize all that we've created in that state is really for something greater. The expression of love or service, or, letting spirit move through us into expression in some way that we don't even know exactly what it's going to be.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because I've been having a wonderful opportunity to meet some young people in their 20s. My son is 21 now. And, but a young man came to deliver water to my house, of all things. And we got into an hour-long conversation and about consciousness, about where is he going in life. He's only 22, all this stuff. And he said to me, he goes, I've just decided that I am going to leave this job because it's not feeding my soul. For a 22-year-old to say that. And he goes, and I'm going to go do this other thing where I think I can get fed. And he goes, and I'll do that until I feel like I'm not getting fed anymore. And then I'll go do the other thing. And to me, in my old age, if you will, I was like, wow, if only I had known that at 22. To go and do the thing that feeds me, as opposed to do the thing that's expected of me, or that's going to get the results with the car and the house and the thing. And he goes, and I have absolute faith that I will always be provided for. I was like, who are you and how did you walk in my house? That's like some sort of I don't know. And I noticed this with my son's generation. A lot of these kids they're not necessarily going after the brass ring, if you will, with the money at the end of the rainbow. They're going after the thing. They're already programmed to go after who they are, to be. They're
going after their dharma.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch too, and I'm excited for them, because they're going to, it just feels like they're the new wave, if you will, of consciousness on the planet that's going to support us all. Thank you very much. So going back to Dharma, Kathy, you said the first pillar is to look within and see what your Dharma is.
Right, and do some discernment. Do some Dharma discernment about who are you? What are your gifts? When are you the happiest? What are you doing when you're the happiest? It's not just I'm on vacation, but what's the quality of the experience? What's going on there really when you're the happiest? and what does your heart feel called to do? I think one of the most important questions we can ask every day is, what is mine to do today?
Mm-hmm. But can we go back to
Sure.
asking yourself when you're the happiest? Now, what about those people, and I'm raising my hand again, because there were times in my life when somebody would say, when I was unhappy, AKA depressed, and somebody would say, well, what makes you happy? Do what makes you happy. And in those places, I got to say, that's when I just want to slap the person.
Right. And maybe I would use a deeper word than happy, the word fulfilled.
Fulfilled.
Yes.
Okay.
Start questioning, what am I doing when I am the most fulfilled, when I'm at the most at peace, when I feel like I'm expressing the self that I am in a way that makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That would be a deeper way to look at it.
Okay.
And feel about it.
So then after you've done this Dharma discernment, if you will, then what's the next thing? What's
to aim?
Oh gosh, now I'm seeing an arrow.
To actually aim, right? And because we often don't hit our Dharma because we don't really aim for it. And part of aim is to let go of the things that distract one from Dharma. Everybody in Cope's book, that he writes about, went through major letting go of the things that were other than what they were really called to do. And so we can do an activities analysis of our days and look at what really supports us living our Dharma and what doesn't. And if we really care about it, over time, we will begin to let go of the things that don't actually support it. You can't hit it if you don't aim for it.
Okay, I feel like I'm being stretched again, Kathy, as you're saying that. Okay, so yes, so I'm going to aim for the thing that I am here to do or here to be.
Right? Be and do are kind of, work together in this.
Right, because you got to do. You can't just sit.
Yeah, no, it's who you are becomes what you do. And
Okay.
when you know who you are, you will know what to do. That's the Krishna teaching.
Okay, and
yeah.
so then I'm going to aim for knowing who I am.
Yes. First.
Oh, okay.
And then once you know who you are, you'll look at how that wants to be expressed. Sorry, I should let you ask the question.
No, that's good. No. So after I know who I am, I'm going to look to see how that wants to be expressed.
And then you start doing your Dharma on purpose.
Yes.
Just like you doing this radio program.
Yes.
You're doing it on purpose.
Absolutely, I am. I'm just thinking about all those people that are still lost in the who am I question, and why am I here? So if I'm going to aim for so part of the aiming of this next step is letting go of things that distract me. So are you talking about letting go of like video games and shopping?
Yeah.
And
unless video games, I mean, sure, it's fun to do things for recreation. So this is not, completely hardcore, but it's we can all look and see where we let our energy go into avenues that really don't support us living our Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else is watching, and there's no standard. It's only what's true for you and what is the most fulfilling. And how would it be if one became more laser-like in the way, let me just say it differently, how would it be if we all became more laser-like in the way that we use our energies, that we actually focus them in the direction of what we're called to do?
Yeah, I notice quite a few people in my current life that get, it's easy for them to get distracted. And the distraction looks like, I'm gonna go do the laundry, but first I have to go over here and answer the mail, and then I see in the mail that I've got this bill that I need to pay, and then I understand that bill means I've got to go and see if there's money. It's that kind of distractions. Those are all about getting things done.
Right.
But what happens then is eventually people will go, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to sit down and watch the reruns I have recorded. Mm-hmm. Or I'm just going to go buy the thing I really, really, really don't need and amp up my credit card, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we do all kinds of things, don't we?
Yeah. So it sounds like this is going back to being or developing self-responsibility of, okay, I want to aim to be who I came here to be and to do what I came here to do. I want to focus on that.
Right. And if that becomes of higher value, then it becomes easier to let go of the distractions because they just don't serve. You know, the pain of that probably gets too great at some point.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and I think it's also the pain of the expectation of, because what as we're talking, Kathy, what I'm seeing, like in my life, is the expectation of, well, if I'm not going to be the thing I thought I was going to be, I'm going to be this different thing. How do I segue? And the expectation of needing a segue, needing a support, if you will, to get to the segue part.
Yeah, I think we take steps.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know, there's a commercial that I've liked on TV for Nutri-Grain bars, and it's a woman who is on her way to work, and you know she walks instead of taking the bus, and then she passes by the bakery. You know, doesn't eat a Danish, but pulls a Nutri-Grain bar out of her purse, and at lunch, you know, she has a salad instead of the pizza that's going around, and she takes the stairs, you know, up and down. And the line was, one good decision leads to another. And you know, if we really care, all it's about is the next step. Be on the step that you're on and take the next step in the direction of what you really want to have happen. We don't have to go from 0 to 100, right?
Right.
One day.
Right.
But if the trend is toward what we really are called to and what is really fulfilling, how good is that?
Really? And it sounds like the tortoise and the hare thing, the slow and steady thing is what's going to win the race.
Yeah.
Just staying focused on what you want.
Right.
And not looking over at what your neighbor's doing.
Yeah.
That whole
That's right.
comparison thing happens often.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Kathy, I think we're going to take a short break.
Okay.
You're listening to Living Your Inspired Life on News Talk 1590 KVTA. We're going to be right back.
Whoever you are, come, whoever you are.
Welcome back to Living Your Inspired Life. The music we're listening to going in and out of commercial is by my dear friend Jennifer Russell. And you can go to her website, which I believe is jenniferruthrussell.com, and check out the work that she does. She also did a show with me. So go to livingyourinspiredlife.org and look at the show that Jennifer and I did together, and you can hear more of her amazing music. And meanwhile, also just another reminder, while you're at the livingyourinspiredlife.org website, click on the Indiegogo pink logo and see what we're doing, raising money to keep Living Your Inspired Life and Positive Talk Radio on the air, and contribute. And thank you so much to each and every person that has contributed. I'm going to name some names right now. I said I would. Thank you, Joan, Will, Tara Lee, Billy, Tessie, Bernadette, Arthur, Rhonda, Kevin, Donna, Carla, Marilyn, Doreen, Denise, Bethany, Jennifer, Joyce, Scott, Karen, and Pat. And there's more people that have donated. But thank you all. I am deeply, deeply grateful. So with that said, I'm having a great conversation about Dharma, or life purpose, with Dr. Kathy Hearn. And Kathy, before we went to break, we were talking about some of the pillars of Dharma, which is the first one is to look within and discern what your gifts are and who you are, or what you're here to do. And the other one you said was to aim
Yeah, do it full out is the actual statement, but contained in that is aim. Aim and give your all to it.
Wow. Now, I just want to say one more thing before we move to the other two, because doing it full out sometimes feels exhausting, do you know? And then if you're giving it all out all the time,
it doesn't say give it all out. It says do it full out.
Do it full out. Okay. Explain the difference to everybody.
In other words, and I actually think maybe what fatigues us is when we're off purpose.
Oh.
And we're over-efforting around the things that aren't really feeding our soul or aren't really aligned with who we actually are. I think that's what's exhausting, because when we're actually doing something that we have passion for and it's the right thing to be doing and we feel called to it, there's an incredible energy that comes.
Well, then, so fatigue or depression or that kind of a thing is a good indicator that I'm not doing the right thing.
I think I wouldn't say right or wrong. I would say I'm not doing the thing that's, I'm not doing my dharma. Perhaps it's to look at it. It's to be willing to look at it.
Okay. Otherwise, I could just need a nap.
It, but I'm distracted in a bunch of other ways. Now, there's nothing wrong with naps. They really help one's doing one's dharma.
So then, what's the next pillar of dharma?
The third pillar we talked about a little bit was let go of the fruit.
Okay, now let's tap on that some more. Let's expand that out, because
okay.
You go.
So what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
That means, I don't know that I can say it any differently than I did before, but it means that you do what you do because it's yours to do. And that, it's being done for the expression of it and the knowing that the intention is for good. It's not doing it in order to make money, although it's lovely to make money from one's dharma. There's nothing in dharma that says you can't have what you need financially. It's about what you do it for. And in that teaching of Indra's net, the idea is we do what we do that we're called to do because that holds up our piece of the net. We're being faithful over where we've been placed in life.
It's interesting as you're saying this, because I'm getting a couple of images. I've just seen two different movies in the last week, and do I say what they are? One was talking to, in my mind, a very positive, focused group, and the other one was entertaining a very definitely focused, but focused on kind of like ugly stuff in life, And I, of course, always like the very happy things. But in this one positive one, they were talking about how we have been fed over the years or decades or centuries negative stuff that constantly stirs up the human it's not even a need. It makes people want more of the negative stuff instead of going, wow, that's negative stuff and I don't want it anymore. So it sounds to me like part of this dharma thing that you're talking about, Kathy, is about really discerning what's the positive I want in my life. What's the highest expression I can be?
Yes. I would say the second one that you said.
The highest expression I can be.
Meaning the truest.
Truest.
Meaning the truest expression of who you uniquely are and innately are, and the truest, the truest revelation or use of that in the world.
Mm-hmm. Truest to myself, not to somebody else's standard.
Correct. Absolutely.
Because as growing up, you often think you're supposed to meet your parents' standards, and lo and behold, no. That's just a guideline. So then letting go of the fruits, or letting go of the outcome of what it is you're doing, and just really staying focused, aiming for that place of doing it for the highest expression of my truth, of myself.
Right. I think you could say it that way. Yes.
Brings us happiness.
Well, you tell me. I'm more fulfilled than I've been
Yeah.
in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I am raising my hand. Me too. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting because right now where I am, I'm having so much fun doing the good work that we do here on Living Your Inspired Life, and that's all I need to do. And then I get to go see a movie if I want.
Yeah. There you go.
So then, what would you say to people that are having a hard time letting go of the fruits, letting go of the outcome, letting go of what it is they think they're supposed to get?
You know, I think all of this requires a lot of patience with self, and it's just to look and see what's actually going on. And there's nothing wrong with amassing. I want to say it again, with amassing the good of life. But very often people, amass the great good of life, and then they say, "Isn't there something more than this?" So it's really just knowing yourself and seeing where you are. I mean, somebody listening may most appropriately be in the stage where it's really important to set goals and produce results. That's a really important time of life. And others may be moving into this place where they realize that what's actually going on as they do what they're doing is something even greater, that there's something flowing through them that's greater than making money and paying the bills.
Mm-hmm. So then when you move from letting go of the fruits into, I guess this all happens at the same time. It can, right? You work in all these pillars around the same time.
Sure.
It's not
there
like
may be a natural flow to it as well.
So then what's the fourth one? What do you do? What's
the fourth one? Is just turn it over. In other words, turn it over to the greater something that you feel a part of. It was in this chapter in Cope's book that Gandhi ends the book. So all of Gandhi's life was there. And yeah.
So you turn it over to like a higher source.
Whatever, yeah, just turn it over to life, turn it over.
Okay, so this kind of feels like it folds back in on itself, in that you are, when I turn it over to a higher source, say, then it feels like letting go of everything sometimes.
Well, it actually comes back, well, it could be.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, this is just one teaching. This is not the only teaching in the world, but this is the teaching about Dharma.
Right.
That, very simply, it's about knowing who you are and what your gifts are, knowing where you're placed on the net of life, so to speak, that what you're called to do, doing it full out, letting that be your contribution to the net of life, letting go of the outcome. You're not doing it for the outcome, and releasing the whole thing, you could say, to life.
So that sounds like trust more than...
Yeah, I think trust is a very beautiful thing.
Yeah, so then trusting that everything that I'm doing is I don't mean right in opposed to correct, but in right alignment with the truth of who I am.
Right.
And
exactly.
trusting that the work that I'm doing or the ideas I'm creating or whatever it is that we do in our Dharma is fulfilling my purpose, my soul purpose, if you will.
Exactly. And I think that you do this, I'm sure, with every radio program.
Mm-hmm.
That you're living your Dharma in this program. You're doing it full out in this time that we're on together. And you have no control over the outcome of any of it. And you let it go once it's over. So you'll be ready for the next one, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, that is that. How'd you know, Kathy? How'd you know? That is, and then people come up to me and say, when you said on the show, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I don't remember.
Yeah. Or an artist, I mean, it's all, there comes a point where we just have to release our creation into the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's it.
And it may not feel complete, but it's you just know it's time to let it go.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Because, I know lots of painters that when they look at their work that they've given away or sold or whatever, and they go back and look at it, they're like, I could have done a little bit more burnt umber there. And but at some point, there just comes a time where you let it go. Same with filmmakers and authors. Wow, I could have written that differently.
Yeah, Yeah.
So, Kathy, then let's go back to this, or not go back to this. I want to ask, in terms of applying Dharma and soul purpose and doing what's ours and knowing who you are and following your inner truth and expressing it to fulfillment. What's in it for our human family? How does that work in connection to all of us? I mean,
well, let's see.
Let's riff on this a bit.
I think that truly, if everybody was connected with their deep essence and goodness, and wholeness, but their essence and their contribution, their gifts and their talents and what they could give, and if everyone was doing what was theirs to do, probably the whole world would be taken care of, because we are really living Indra's net. I mean, just look at the internet.
I know. When you were saying that earlier, I was like, well, that sounds
yeah.
like the internet.
Right. And so we all are really living an interdependent, interconnected life, and we know that what we send through the net comes back to us. That's another teaching of Indra's net. What goes around comes around. And we can pretend that we're isolated and we can feel isolated, but there's nothing. We're not in isolation.
Boy, that's kind of explains Facebook a bit too,
Yeah.
When you post something on Facebook and then all those people get to get on your Facebook and tell you what they think about that. Really?
Yeah.
That goes around, comes around.
Yeah. And I think, personally for myself, because I look at things in the spiritual perspective, I think we're heading toward the full realization of oneness, not just an idea or a concept. We start with the concept, but I think more and more in my own life, the veils drop and duality becomes less real to me.
Mm-hmm.
And more I'm in that more of a oneness state. I don't mean I'm blissed out all the time, but it's like the veil thins, a little bit, and there's just a greater sense of oneness. So I think ultimately that's where we're going as a human family, because I don't know where else there is to go. Now, there aren't signs of oneness happening around the world. There's signs of everything but,
Right, the chaos.
Yeah, there's a lot of chaos and all kinds of things that are difficult, and yet I think evolution is moving us toward a greater realization of oneness.
Mm-hmm. And what I know about things that happen in nature is that when something is looking chaotic, it's generally in that transformative state, like a butterfly in a cocoon, or caterpillar in a cocoon. That emulsification is the transformation place, and it feels like everything's falling apart. It feels like death and dying and destruction, which is what we get to see right now.
Yeah.
And yet, so Kathy, what would you say, or how would you encourage people to stay focused on the more positive, the chaos and all the war and all the killings and shootings and whatever we're seeing, that is, how can you encourage others to stay focused that we are moving into oneness?
I can only say what I do, and that is, we're an evolving species, and everything, we're in a state of evolution, even though it looks like devolution a lot of times. But there is something taking place that is calling us to higher levels of consciousness. And so I like to look at it. I mean, we could say everything's going to hell in a handbasket, but I don't find that very productive. So I'm going to work with my mind in a way that I'm thinking thoughts that are actually help me get up in the morning and do what I'm called, do my dharma, do what I'm called to do. And I think I just have to trust that there is a grand evolution, and that we're learning, we're awakening. We're certainly seeing the consequences of our action in terms of global warming.
Yeah.
And why there's lots of really interesting learning going on. And if we can stay unattached, but watch and stay involved in making our own little spot on the net a beautiful place to be, if we're living the highest truth of our being and trying to bring forth, the best that we have in us, then that's about all we can do. It's a pretty amazing time.
It really is, and it feels like there's when you're as you're speaking about Indra's net, it feels like there is that also a place of energy. This is the only way I can say it, because when you were describing the net and the jewels, the places where they connect. But it also feels like that energy, that interconnection or internet, it has energy that goes out. So if we are doing what it is we're here to do on purpose, then the energy that we send out becomes more positive to the other people that we're connecting with.
Right. And we become models for fulfillment. If we're managing ourselves to live a fulfilled life, then we're modeling that for other people.
Okay. Models for fulfillment. I like that because I think there's a lot of people out there that are just kind of wandering around a little bit lost and not feeling fulfilled or sourced, if you will, and looking to others to say, can you give me something?
Yeah.
So if we model fulfillment, which is different than just giving them fulfillment. Can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, here's the thing that I notice is if, like, raising a son, if I do it for him, he's never going to learn to do his own laundry, or cook his own food or move out of the house. Right. But when he does it for himself, then he feels accomplished or fulfilled, right?
Yeah, well, you're into a whole thing about parenting older kids.
Yeah.
A 30-year-old.
Yeah.
And a 36-year-old. Like, how do I parent them at this age? So.
But to do something for another person, I'm just trying to expand this idea of modeling, so that we're not doing other people's work for them.
Right, because that's actually disempowering in the long run.
Yes, it is. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen with myself. I've seen it happen with numerous clients where, and it's interesting because there is a lot of moms that I've been working with that have to learn not to do it for their kids anymore. Yeah. So the child can learn to fulfill their own needs.
Right, because we all had to learn it, so they have to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's the only way to go out in the world, right? It's like the mother hawk that pushes the babies out of the nest so they can fly.
Yeah.
That's the only way they're going to learn how to fly.
Right.
She can't explain aerodynamics to them or listen, when you step off that last twig, there's a big drop. She just has to push them out and allow their instinct to kick in, which is, again, this goes back to the giving it all up, right, in the Dharma plan.
Yeah, turn it over.
Turn it over. Wow. Well, is there anything else, Kathy, that you want to speak to? We have 2 more minutes, just to wrap up.
I think we just kind of covered it. I would just say, start with looking within and seeing who you really are. It's a delicious inquiry. And it's okay to be in the time of questions. We have to be patient. Rilke wrote a beautiful poem, Letters to a Young Poet, about that, about be patient with everything unresolved in our hearts. That one day, even though we're in the questions now, we'll one day live into the answers. And I think that's the Dharma path. Yeah,
and I, for one, have not been particularly patient with any kind of path. In fact, I was traveling over the weekend, and my partner and I were going to go someplace, and I had the map out, and I'm looking at the map, and you go from A to B, and that's how we get there. And he's like, well, look at that over there, and he's turning left, and he's turning right, and now we're not on the map. We're not even on the GPS thing. And I had to, again, what is it? Give it all up. I had to give it all up and go, all right, at some point, we're going to get to the place we want to go. We're going to get home. But in the meantime, I had to be very patient with him turning left and turning right and looking for the thing he saw on the street, and not allow myself to be frustrated by what I thought needed to happen. And I think that's a big lesson, because I think we as human beings are so busy and so constantly getting from the next gig or the next meeting or the next to-do, that we forget that life is really about living in patience. And it can be delicious, like you said, Kathy, if we're in the exploration of our own Dharma.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Dr. Kathy Hearn, everyone, is going to be speaking at Camarillo Center for Spiritual Living June 21st. You can go to cslcamarillo.org to find out more about that. And then also I invite you to go to Kathy Hearn, HEARN.com, and find out more about what Kathy does, because this is a spectacular woman. And I am so grateful that you were able to have time to spend with me today, Kathy.
Thank you, Susan. Lovely to be with you.
Thank you. And so I'm just going to end with, and so it is, namaste.